Hi, this is actually a video summary of today's newsletter for June 23rd, 2023. This title is Bill C-18, Bell Canada Layoffs and the Effect on Rural Canadian Journalism. Hello, amazing humans. I took a breath recently to think about all that's happening in rural Canada, rural Canadian media, and the journalism landscape in general. Just over a week ago, Canadian media and telecom company Bell laid off 1,300 people, shut down 6 radio stations, and is selling off another 3 radio stations. One of the shuttered stations is News Talk 1290 CJBK in London, Ontario, and that's the last radio station where I worked, had a radio job at a radio station. For folks that used to rely on that London station to hear about traffic tie-ups, weather, bus cancellations, in the winter, we'll have to turn to other sources. Most people, are familiar with the internet, but this is something that, is really fading. Bill C-18, the Online News Act, has now received royal assent after passing the House and the Senate. On the same day that the bill received royal assent, social media giant Meta confirmed that it will end access to news on its social media sites. So that includes Instagram, for all, and Facebook rather, as well, and for all Canadian users before Bill C-18, the Online News Act, comes into full force. The law will force Meta and Google to pay news outlets for posting their journalism on their platforms. So the government shows no interest, though, in bargaining with these big conglomerates. So where does that leave rural news and information? In the past few months, I've been working with a group of students from the another Venture for Canada entrepreneurship program on a study of the news consumption habits of rural Canadians. The group utilized one-on-one Zoom interviews to ask folks from different rural areas across the country different questions. They asked things like how much folks paid, or even if they had reliable, accessible internet service. Where do they get their news, and do they trust it? And what would they be willing to pay for factual information? So I personally found the results eye-opening. The students gave a presentation and they did a written report. It was fantastic. I'm working on pulling all of that together in the next few weeks, and we'll be sharing the report before the start of the fall. With all of these recent developments in mind, and with the results of the latest study I will have in hand, I'm developing the next season of the podcast and some more projects also related to rural Canada and issues in rural Canada. I'll be sharing some of those very soon. In the meantime, in upcoming summer podcast episodes, I have some really great conversations to share from my time in Whitehorse, Yukon at the Equal Future Summit. And I will continue to share the rural Canadian history moments created by the University of Guelph rural diarist students. If you'd like to suggest the direction for the new season of the podcast, or any specific rural Canadian projects or topics you'd like to hear about, please don't hesitate to hit reply on the email of the newsletter and let me know, or you can leave a voicemail, and there's a button there for you to do that. Are the religious right and the freedom fighters working together to protest drag story time in rural Canada? Here's a little hint about one of the projects that I'm looking to bring to fruition. I recently attended a drag story time in a local neighboring rural town as a supporter because I heard there would be protesters. We are hosting a Pride celebration in the municipality where I live, as well as a drag story time event at a local library. I wrote a blog post about my experience, and there were protesters from 2 different groups. That blog post has been viewed almost 500 times. It's been shared a lot. There's a link to it in the newsletter. The next Pride event I attended in another neighboring town, I showed up with a microphone. I'm going to leave it there, and I'm just going to say stay tuned. This week's podcast episode is called Dispelling Period Stigma with Free Periods Canada, Zeba Khan, and Nikki Oviac. While in Whitehorse last month, I had the opportunity to speak with folks doing amazing work in rural and remote Canada. 2 of those folks were Zeba Khan and Nikki Oviac from Free Periods Canada. As our rural Canadian communities grapple with conflicting views about gender identity and the right to live freely as authentic people and simply exist, if we can take a step back, often conversations around periods and menstruation along gender lines and generations can be strained and awkward at best. Why is this? Why does the very mention of the word period make people uncomfortable, including those of us who menstruate? Why has the onus fallen on typically woman-identifying members of families to educate and often gatekeep those conversations? Zeba Khan founded Free Periods Canada in 2016, and it's a grassroots nonprofit based in Western Canada. But the organization started out as a university club. Zeba grew up in Bangladesh and relocated to Canada in 2015 as an international student. And Nikki Oviac is the Associate Director of Free Periods Canada Foundation and has worked tirelessly to promote menstrual equity and address period poverty in the country. There is a couple of spots where you can click to listen to the podcast episode. Rural Canadian History Moments. This week we release our second Rural Canadian History Moment. This Rural Canadian History Moment was created by University of Guelph student Christian Doran as part of the University of Guelph Diarist Course Project in 2023. The course was taught by Catherine A. Wilson, and you can click on the image below to connect to the video on the Clearing a New Path YouTube channel. This one is about Thomas Logren. And of course, you can suggest an episode. You can leave me a voice message, you can email, of course, you can just hit reply and send me a message that way too. That's it for this week. Take care of yourself and take care of each other. Until next time.